Washington, ghost-like objects dart across the radar screen at the CAA Traffic Control Center at National Airport for several hours, traveling more than 100 miles an hour. Air Force jet fighters spend several hours chasing the objects plotted on the radar scope.
Something else is out there.
There's something else out there, okay.
Of all the banks and braes of bonny Scotland, none holds more fascination than the murky waters of Loch Ness.
Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
Blackwater Media presents DARKFALL. Real-life encounters with the paranormal and the unexplained. It was 1995 and I just graduated high school. I started hanging out with an old friend that I hadn't seen for years. And one day we just decided, hey, let's go to New Orleans. And we did. We had $140 between us, and back then that was more than enough. We made it to New Orleans and almost died from culture shock, turned around and headed to Magnolia, Mississippi to get some sleep. We stayed at Magnolia Inn. Now, it was a real shithole, but it was nice and cool. It was May or June, and in southern Mississippi, cool was the only adjective that mattered. We stayed up that night playing poker, drinking Gordon's vodka, and talking about who knows what, probably girls, college, and girls again. At some point I said, hey, ever been to Texas? He said no. Well, shit, pack your bag and let's roll. We had a road atlas, and Marshall, Texas was right across the border from Shreveport. Now keep in mind, this was really before the days of widespread cell phone use and nothing like GPS. Anyway, we arrived in Shreveport, made a phone call to another friend who we were actually supposed to be staying with. Now, both of our mothers had called looking for us. The only person that knew where we were was the buddy on the phone. It was no big deal. We'd be home in a day or two. Now, I'm going to be a little bit short on details because if I don't, this will turn into a novel-length story about chasing armadillos and being, well, shit, chased by the boogeyman. Before we left that rest area in Shreveport where we made the call, we actually saw an armadillo. Now, let me tell you something about these damn things. Those bastards will hiss, jump, and turn into Tasmanian devils if you corner them. They also carry nasty shit like rabies and everything else, probably leprosy. And we were 18. We chased the armadillo around for an hour. Now let me tell you about Shreveport. I don't know how it is now, but that summer, it looked and smelled like a place where oil and metal went to die. It was dirty. It was the worst. We crossed the bridge and saw people fishing about 100 yards from where a drainage pipe from a factory was spewing forth waste upriver from the fishermen. The locals reminded me of the locals in Adamsville. Bald-headed women, cross-eyed men, a lot of bald-headed, cross-eyed kids. It was like a damn Rob Zombie movie come to life. Shit, I felt like a movie star because I had a full head of hair and could see straight. But Marshall, Texas was 40 miles away, so we rolled on. Marshall was a decent little town, home of the Fire Ant Festival. Can you believe that shit? We stopped at a little barbecue joint and had a Coke and some pulled pork. It was getting late and the sun was setting. We looked at the map and decided to backtrack a bit and head up rural Route 43 through Karnak and past Caddo Lake. We would eventually run into Highway 59, head to Texarkana, and then headed back home. When we left the barbecue joint and headed towards 43, it was dusk. Highway 43 wasn't well lit. It was almost as dark as Natchez Trace Parkway. I've got a good story to tell about using a pair of pantyhose as a fan belt for an old diesel Mercedes. Don't ever get stuck on the trace after dark. Ever. Anyway, my friend was driving and we were doing about 45 miles per hour. Any faster would have been reckless even for a couple of 18-year-old dumbasses. and I had no intentions of getting mixed up with a bunch of redneck cops down here in Texarkana. So like I said, the highway was dark and winding. There were lots of hills that ended in curves. There were beady and glowing eyes on both sides of the road. But I knew that these were just the critters that came out at night. Raccoons, foxes, coyotes, things like that. You could hear the crickets and the bullfrogs over the sound of the wind rushing by that old Sentra. It was peaceful and creepy at the same time. And that humidity was a real thing, tangible. The air was thick. It smelled like pastures, hay, and swamp. We drove for what seemed like hours, and it was after midnight, and I saw a sign that informed me that Bivens was the next town of any size. I was hypnotized by the yellow lines on the road. We hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. And I started getting sleepy, so I rolled the window down and lit a cigarette. There was music coming from the radio, or maybe it was the cassette player. I think it was something by CCR. I smoked my cigarette, absent-mindedly flicking ashes out of the window. I took one last puff and flicked the still-burning Camel short off into the woods. And then I saw it. If you're enjoying this story and would like to hear it to its conclusion, go on over to blackwatermedia.net and click on the menu tab that says Become a Swamp Hunter Society member. And for only $4.99 per month, you can have access to the finest, most entertaining, thrilling, and exciting paranormal, supernatural, and horror story narration available. Explore an amazing universe of monsters, nightmares, and all manner of terror and creeping shadows with your Blackwater Media Swamp Hunter Society membership. Get it today.